Olwethu Nodata is a passionate and intentional advocate for empowering the girl child and creating spaces where individuals from all walks of life are seen, heard, and given the space to achieve to their highest potential. A former national marketing manager for Africa's largest optometric network, her transition into media and broadcasting has come as an aggravating and challenging adventure. She's had the honor of being crowned Miss South Africa Second Princess in 2020 and confines to serve as a mentor for the organization. After only 2 years in the industry, she is now a radio host on Cape Town's biggest radio station. She is the go-to host and MC for multinational corporates across the country and serves on the board of Amehlo Trust, which seeks to empower young black female optometrists through equity funding for their own businesses. As a broadcaster, community builder, businesswoman, and speaker, her biggest role is being mom to 2 girls who she wishes to inspire to excellence by being a solid example of hard work, commitment, and leading with kindness.
Oh, wow. And just like that, we are into our next webinar for the Future Global Leaders Club. A very good afternoon to our Future Global Leaders Club members, our proud parents, and our proud ambassadors. And a special welcome to our guests this afternoon. We have Neo, we have Sisbulele Noputma. We're so glad you could all join us this afternoon. Listen, the 17th of May is a very special date because you've all chosen excellence this afternoon, looking at inspiring and motivating you, and of course, doing a physics masterclass this Saturday. I hope you all are going to be paying attention, and I hope you have your notes ready and you're ready to ask questions to make sure that the 3 hours we're going to spend here today is not hours that are wasted. Before we get into the session, of course, we know that the Future Global Leaders Club was founded by a young and ambitious 14-year-old who's now a matric student. She is a member of this club and helps curate these sessions with you and I, making sure that it's really specific to make sure that you sharpen your excellence. Let's hear from our founder. Let's first see a video, actually, of the foundation of the Future Global Leaders Club.
My name is Lisa Zima. I'm 13 years old and I am the founder of the Future Global Leaders Club. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this prestigious and esteemed club that is exclusive to consistently hardworking, determined, intelligent, diligent, and ambitious learners like you. You have shown your potential to strive for the best no matter what it takes. If you want to be consistently consistent in your academic excellence, if continuous improvement is your motto, and if you want to be inspired into greatness, then the Future Global Leaders Club is your virtual home. I officially welcome you as we entrench and firmly embed ourselves as the global leaders of the future.
Oh, wow. So about 3.5 years ago, this vision was born and it came into realization through all of you taking part in this platform. Alicia, what are you looking forward to in this session? Let's hear from you quickly before we get into our speakers.
Hey everyone. So we're going into a very important time of the year, which is mid-year exams. And I think it's really going to benefit us all to hear from Uneo, who is an FGL alumni, who was a 7-star member since 2022. She's now doing her BSc in Computational and Applied Mathematics, and that's only been made possible through her achieving outstanding matric results with 9 distinctions. Yes, not 7 distinctions, 9 distinctions. So Neo, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and we really want to take a few pages, of your book as you aspire and work towards, getting the same type of achievements on your level. Mrs. Ulele is not only an educator, but she has an actuarial science degree. So her knowledge in physics is surely, going to equip the grade 8s and 9s to achieve their highest potential, and help them navigate questions with the absolute confidence. With Marvel, your partnership with the grades 10 to 12s, is a masterclass for excellence. And we're surely not going to be leaving any marks on the table after we're done with this session. We also had introduced the NYDA essay writing competition some few weeks ago. And we're really excited, to see which submissions have been selected as winners internally. So yeah, overall, I really encourage every one of us to use this time to the absolute maximum, and to take notes, to ask questions, and to leave this session being more empowered than ever and ready to get those distinctions in our mid-year exams.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Lihle. So perfectly said. And she's basically laid out our program for today. We have an inspirational and motivational session with Neo Leseilane, and then we have 2 breakaway sessions focusing on grade 8s and 9s with Usis Mulele, and then Ubudmaba is going to take care of the grade 10s, 11s, and 12s in the separate breakout room. But before we get into that, Ulihle just spoke about a book, an essay writing competition that we introduced at the last webinar in partnership with the NYDA, and of course looking into the G20 summit. We challenged you to take part in this competition. Your submissions were due on the 30th of April, and we said that internally we'd run our own competition as a Future Global Leaders Club, looking to inspire you to become global voices, contributing your solutions to global problems. And of course, as Future Global Leaders, that's what you should be doing. And we were so encouraged to see entries coming through from you. We were able to shortlist about 10 of the essay submissions, and looking really clearly at what it is that the adjudicators and the judges at the NYDA were looking forward to. So you had 2 topics that you needed to submit for. One was sustainability and shaping a greener future, where you had to explore ways in which the world can adopt more sustainable practices to safeguard the environment. And the second one was youth power, driving change in a globalized world. So just reflecting on how impactful youth can be in terms of driving change within local communities and indeed impacting the world. So there were a number of entries, like I said, and we were looking at how you each attacked the topic per se, and looking at what the judges were looking for in particular. So you needed to state a clear introduction, state the problem, state the solution, and then consider the outlines that were given by the judges. So this is what the judges were looking for: originality. So your essay should offer fresh ideas and perspectives, and it's not just about stating facts, it's about proposing solutions and offering a new way of looking at the issue. Then you had to look at relevance as well, address the topic directly, and then explore the issues in depth and make sure that you link your ideas to real world examples where possible. And then thirdly, there was clarity there. Your essay should be well organized and easy to follow. Make sure your argument flowed logically from introduction to the conclusion. And then personal insights. This was something that was so important for the judges to see, in order to be able to see how you reflected on your personal insights. So we saw a few of these essays that really had some good structure, but we found what was a common error, though, as we were adjudicating with the rest of the panel, was the fact that a lot of you tend to use ChatGPT. Now, it's very important to differentiate between using ChatGPT optimally to enhance your learning and your education journey, and as leaning on it as a crutch, where it actually makes your originality and your opinions a very, very what do I say, muddied or very linear. So we found that we'd see some of the essays, the introduction is exactly the same, the conclusion is exactly the same, and we can see that those ideas and those thoughts aren't your original thoughts, but rather generated by AI, and that's something that we noted there. And also sometimes you tended to make your contributions way too short. So you just state the problem and not really dig into some really clear examples of the problem. You'd suggest a solution, but one that was too broad and not directly linked to the solution of the problem. And then just in terms of your conclusion, taking us from the start into the finish, a conclusion that's a one sentence, a two sentence is not sufficient to sort of wrap up the full submission. I think we're very excited to see how enthusiastic you are in terms of essay writing, but we also recognize the fact that our role as a Future Global Leaders Club is to support you and to help you sharpen your excellence. And it was with that in mind that we've decided that we're going to put together a workshop, all right? So that's going to focus on essay writing. It's just going to be an hour. And it's really going to be a masterclass on how to structure the essay, how to apply your critical thinking, and how to really delve into the topic in a way that's really going to make sure that you score high marks as a judges or a panel, even an examiner looks at your essay. With that being said, there were two submissions that really stood out, coming through from a grade 8 learner and a grade 11 learner. So we have a runner-up and we have a winner. I'd like to congratulate Ukazimla Martin, a grade 8 student from Ebenezer Majombozi, for submitting also an essay on sustainability, shaping a greener future. Now, Kazimla used a beautiful terms of insights and relevance, stated the problem solution in a beautiful way, was able to relate it to her lived experience and her community. And then she was also able to give practical solutions to it. You know, she looked at her community, the areas of pollution, the attitudes of people and community members, and how we are contributing to the decline of our environment, and how we can then practically recycle, reduce, and reuse to make sure that we are creating a greener environment and more sustainable future. So Kazimla, congratulations on coming second runner-up, just short of winning that because we lacked a global perspective from you. But I think in terms of your insight, your originality, and the relevance in applying to the topic, you did very well. And then we have a winner for this essay submission. A big congratulations to Anam Sofe from grade 11, also Ebenezer Majombozi, who walks away with 2,500 rands. Congratulations to you. And really stated the problem statement so perfectly. A clear structure in her essay as well, with an introduction, a table of contents stating the problem statement, contributory causes, who is affected, the solutions and the benefits, even bringing it down to her community and her school, solutions of an environmental club, solutions of eco-friendly transportation, recycling programs for the community, and then also drawing from global solutions in order to cultivate local solutions, showing real research, real time taken to understand the topic, and real application of real life examples. So you'll be smiling all the way to the bank, Anam and Kazimla. Congratulations to you. Please remember that Lulamila will send you those permission slips for your parents to sign off when you're receiving that prize. We encourage you all to take part. We still have a third place that's up in the running. If you feel like these tips that I've just given you and the feedback I've just given you is something that you want to take back to the drawing board, we'll give you until the 30th of May to resubmit your essays, all right? So those of you who submitted, if you're thinking about what you did and you wrote in those essays and you want a chance to win 1,000 rands, you want to claim the 1,000 rand third position, you have until the 30th of May to submit to us your final essay submissions, all right? Okay. Let's get into why we are here today. We're going to get into the inspirational and motivational aspect of our session before we dive into the breakaway masterclasses for physics. Ulihle spoke about an FGL alumni who matriculated last year, Neo Leseilane. She is our guest speaker for today. She's really phenomenal. A first-year student pursuing a BSc degree in computational and applied mathematics, having achieved 9 distinctions in her matric year. She ranked in the top 1% of all IEB learners in 5 of her subjects. Additionally, She represented South Africa in the Pan-African Maths Olympiad last year, and she was a prefect, a captain of debating, and a captain of public speaking at her school. She now studies at the University of Wits, where she holds the Vice Chancellor Scholarship for being among the top 20 matric applicants. She is a superstar, and I don't want to just gloss over her 9 distinctions. I want to highlight them on the screen so you can see the marks that she got. Level 7 all throughout, all 9 of her subjects, really doing phenomenal, with the further studies in maths sitting at 93%, further studies in English at 84%, life sciences 94%, information technology at 95%, and an incredible 98% in mathematics. We truly are in a great, great company with Neo this afternoon. I want you to take down notes, be able to note any questions you have for her. We'll do a Q&A session afterwards. Neo, we are so excited. We know how busy you are. Thank you so much for making the time to join us this afternoon. How are you doing?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm all right. And thank you so much for the very flattering introduction as well.
Well, it's all you. It's everything you've achieved. I'm going to hand over the floor to you. You've got your screen sharing ability and all that stuff. You sorted?
Yes, I have.
All right, well, over to you.
Thank you so much. Okay. So then, hi everybody. Thank you for having me and coming to the seminar. So my presentation is about how to study smarter, not harder, how to make the most of your time and get the results that you want to achieve at the end of your high school journey, and in high school, the smart way. So hi, I'm Neo. I think I can gloss over the introduction since it was already done so well. Thank you again. But as what was said, I'm a first-year student at the University of the Witwatersrand, and I study a BSc in Computational and Applied Mathematics, which is basically the combination of mathematics and computer science, which I really happen to enjoy. Okay, so to start off our presentation, starting strong by navigating grade 8 and 9. So this is the beginning of your high school journey, and this sets the tone for the rest of your high school experience, which is why it's so important that you start it off the right way. So to start off with a quote by Franklin D. Roosevelt, "The only limit to our realization of tomorrow is our doubts of today." So the reason why I chose this specific quote is because I find that if you start grade 8 and 9 already thinking that you're not cut out to be one of the top people in your class academically, to achieve well at the end of your high school career, that already significantly damages your chances of getting there. So it's almost like a mind game. You need to believe that you can do it in order to do it in the end. So how I started off high school was determining what my end goal was. So high school is not an end point, it's a stepping stone. It's a journey to get you somewhere else. So what I'm saying here is that you need something to motivate you to keep going, even when it gets difficult. If your only motivation to do well in high school is just to do well, it becomes very easy to lose motivation as you're going along. Because after that, then what? For me, my end goal was to be able to get into a good university with funding so that my parents wouldn't have to stress as much. And because I already knew that my passion lied somewhere in the STEM field, and that was going to be a very competitive degree to get into. So I knew that whatever my marks were, it needed to be such that I could realize those dreams. So here's my journey through grade 8 and 9. When I first got to high school, I found it very difficult to find my feet. I had gone to a boarding school very far away from home, and I was away from my parents and everyone that I knew. It was a very unfamiliar environment, and the transition between primary school and high school was really jarring. I often felt like I did not belong in my high school when I first got there, and that I would rather just go home. So what I did was I recharacterized these struggles as growing pains. Instead of allowing myself to believe that I was not good enough in comparison to my peers, I told myself that my struggles were natural and necessary to become the person I wanted to be in. If you're comfortable, chances are you're not growing and you're not going anywhere. The fact that I was experiencing struggle meant that I was on the path to improving. So I gave myself the space to grow. With that, I mean that I gave myself the grace to acknowledge that my journey will get easier and that I did not need to be too hard on myself. Likewise, I still sought out activities to facilitate my own growth. For example, in grade 8 and 9, I started doing a lot of mathematics competitions because I knew that that was where one of my passions lied, and I ended up doing really well in that, leading to me representing the country at the Pan-African Maths Olympiad. I also tried to expand my learning in physics outside of the classroom, again, because I saw that as something that I was really passionate about. That helped me still improve while being kinder to myself when I wasn't doing as well as I wanted to in the beginning. So these are the lessons that I learned in grade 8 and 9. First of all, success starts in the classroom. You need to be an active learner. You can't let yourself passively go through all of your classes and then expect to catch up on all of the work that you've done when studying and revising after school. What I mean by success starts in the classroom is that you need to actively engage. You need to be asking questions when you get stuck. You shouldn't be afraid to be seen as not knowing everything. It's perfectly all right if there is something that you don't understand. Make sure that you tackle it as soon as possible. When the teacher asks questions to the class, try to answer, even if it's daunting. At least, if you get it right, that affirms that you know what you're doing. And if you get it wrong, you can be corrected and helped as quickly as possible. So in these ways, that helps you facilitate your learning. And if you're actively engaging in class, that helps you better remember the content. So you're not starting from the beginning when studying for your tests and exams. Secondly, you need to be valuing your learning over your marks. So a student that only values doing well rather than all of the education that they're getting in the process likely crams, passes, and then forgets the content. What you're doing here is you then enter a cycle of constantly cramming, passing, forgetting, which is a very inefficient way to study. You always have large volumes of content to cover instead of gradually learning and remembering what you've done throughout the year to lessen the load when you write your exams at the end of the year. So by valuing learning over my marks, I genuinely fostered a love for the subjects that I did. Even if it was a subject that I didn't have the most interest in, for example, geography for me, I still tried to find ways to make it interesting. So we were learning about natural disasters, and I delved into that to expand my education in a way that I still found enjoyable. It's very important to make sure that school is an enjoyable experience for you. It shouldn't feel like a chore. Otherwise, it will be very hard to constantly try your best. Thirdly, it's important to surround yourself with good people. When you're in grade 8 and 9, you're in a very naive and easily influenceable state of your life. So the people around you often play a role in shaping your character. So the way how you surround yourself with good people is if you see that the people around you aren't the type of people that you want to be when you are older, you need to try to detach yourself from those people and try again with finding new ones. It's okay to be alone in your high school experience. Try out with meeting different people and see who matches your values and your morals and ultimately your goals. You will be able to find your people eventually. Fourth, build good habits early. It's very important to build good habits of time management and self-discipline in this stage of grade 8 and 9, while the workload is still more manageable and less difficult than when you get to grade 10 and up. If you're able to do that, it becomes a lot easier to improve those good habits of time management and self-discipline when the work becomes very difficult. That way, you're better able to stay afloat when you reach the FET phase. Fifth, adopt a growth mindset. By this, you need to reframe all of your struggles as something that you're not able to do yet. For example, if you're not good at maths, frame it as you're not good at maths yet, or you're not good at physics yet. By that, what you're doing is you're letting yourself believe that you can get there eventually. This is very important because if you believe that you can get to that stage where you do achieve your goals, you're a lot more able to reach them in the end. Then lastly, it's important to figure out what your learning style is. So with this one, there is no correct way to study. Effective studying methods are specific to each student. Therefore, it's important to try out different methods to determine what works best for you. There's many learning styles out there that you could incorporate to help your study. For example, mnemonics, mind maps, flashcards, teaching others, using diagrams, or writing out notes. I've put a star next to writing out notes because that can be very time-consuming. So if you use something like that, then you need to prioritize what you're writing out. For example, definitions and laws in physics, rather than all of the concepts in physics. So the learning style that I adopted throughout my high school career was teaching others and writing out notes in bright colors, basically rainbow all over the page. I found that the physically writing out my notes helped me remember it a lot better than if I was just reading it out or saying it aloud. And that made it better for me to store all of these concepts in my long-term memory rather than my short-term memory. Then, of course, when you get to grade 9, you have the very difficult choice of choosing what subjects to take when you get to grade 10 and up. So these are my 5 tips for choosing the right subjects. First of all, explore your interests through extracurricular activities. You may not feel like you know exactly what you want to do through the subjects that you do at school. This is why it's important to get an extra sense of what you like to pursue outside of the school curriculum, especially since the FET phase is so different to how school is in grade 8 and 9. So for me, that was exploring debating and mathematics outside of school. So then in the end, I knew that I either wanted to go into STEM or maybe be a lawyer if that was the path that I wanted to choose when I was older. Secondly, evaluate what your academic strengths and weaknesses are. This is important because when you get to grade 10, you have the opportunity to choose subjects that play to your strengths to make it as easy as possible. That way, you're able to give yourself the best ability to do well in matric. Thirdly, it's important to think about what potential careers you would like to pursue. The reason for this is because what subjects you take up to matric determine what courses you can apply to when you get to university, and then what careers you can go into from there. So if you decide, okay, physics is not something that I want to do, I won't take it. And then you get to matric and realize, I actually want to study something that's part of the science faculty. You may hinder your ability to go into that potential career if you don't consider your career when you're choosing your subjects to begin with. That's why it's important to start thinking about it early on, even if you're not 100% sure, to at least have an idea. Fourth, determine which of your passions align with your strengths. Now, this is very important because it's one thing to be good at what you do, but it's another entirely to love what you do. When you're in university and the work is really, really very hard, if you're just not enjoying what you're doing whatsoever, it's going to be very difficult to motivate yourself to carry on. That's true for your matric year when you're writing finals. That's why it's very important to love what you're learning. And then lastly, consult your teachers and support staff for advice. So the teachers of your school have probably seen hundreds of students try to choose subjects. They likely know if you're ready for a certain subject and can take it to the matric level, or if you should rather go a different route. Ask them for advice, and it will probably help you a lot. So, of these 5 tips, I'd say that the 4th one, determining which of your passions align with your strengths, is the most important, as that is what's most likely going to be able to carry you through to be able to achieve well in your matric exams. Now for the second section of my presentation, staying on track, pushing through grade 10 and 12. To start off with a quote by Winston Churchill, success is not fatal. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. The reason why I chose this quote is because when you get to grade 10 and 11 and into the FET phase, the work gets a lot harder and a lot more. So even though you're struggling, it's important to remember that you can still try your best and get to the goal that you want to hit when you enter matric. It's important to not give up and have the courage to continue. So things to note about this part of your life. Consistency makes the difference. This thing links with the fact that the FET phase functions as a unit. So what I mean by that is often in a lot of your subjects, particularly things like maths and English and physics, all of the work that you do from the beginning of grade 10 carries through all the way to grade 12, and you write about those 3 years in your matric exams. This is why it's important that from the beginning, you're trying your best to understand difficult concepts and learn them well, so that when you get to matric, you don't find yourself trying to cover 3 years of work and then drowning in it. Thirdly, it's important to build a strong foundation. So from the beginning, you need to make sure that you're not just, again, passively learning. You need to make sure that you're consistently hitting your goals throughout the year, not just like going around passively and then trying to get a distinction by the time you hit matric when you haven't been doing that all along. It's about the little bursts of effort that you make throughout your high school journey consistently so that you can get to that finish line. Fourth, don't be afraid to change your mind. What I mean by this is if you get to grade 10 or grade 11 and you find that the subjects that you chose in grade 9, you just aren't enjoying them, it's okay to change your subjects and go a different route. For example, I only picked up life sciences at the beginning of matric. Before that, I was doing art when I realized that the workload of art in combination with the other subjects that I was taking, like physics and life sciences and FS maths and FS English, it just wasn't working out for me. I knew that when I got to matric, I would be busy all the time and I would not have any downtime. So even though life sciences is still a very hectic subject, it was considerably a lot less time consuming than art. So that was best for me and I ended up really enjoying it. Fifth, time management and self-discipline is key. So it's very important to be able to manage yourself, to start studying when you need to start studying, to start your projects well in time before the deadlines so that you aren't rushing to complete them at the last minute. It's important to pace yourself to make sure that you're giving your all instead of being restricted by time constraints. Then lastly, it's important to remember that grade 11 results are used for your university applications. That's not to scare you. That's so that you remember to be consistently putting in an effort from the beginning, not only in matric, and then risk your chances of even getting into university because your grade 11 results aren't good enough to get you provisional acceptance. In grade 11, there are also some important decisions to make. First of all, you need to start considering what university you want to go to. So in this, firstly, it's important to prioritize the degree over the university. For example, I chose Wits because the degree that they had in terms of applied mathematics most closely aligned with what I wanted to do in the future, and it was very flexible. I wouldn't have gotten a degree like this anywhere else in South Africa. Secondly, it's important to check the admission requirements for the degree of your choice. Remember that if you do want to go to university, it's important that you're able to get into the degree that you want to get into. So when you're writing your grade 11 exams, you need to keep that in mind so that you're aiming to be able to apply to the university of your choice with your grade 11 marks. Then lastly, it's okay if you don't have it all figured out, but don't sideline your future. What I mean by that is I didn't know that I specifically wanted to pursue applied maths until I got to October of matric. Before that, I thought that I was going to go into actuarial science until I realized that my heart wasn't in that. So I still knew that I wanted to go into something related to STEM. Explore your options while you're trying to make a decision. Then the second decision to make is in terms of bursaries. So it's important that you check the selection requirements for potential bursaries before you write your grade 11 exams. So again, you know what marks you need to be aiming to achieve. Secondly, you need to look for funding early on in your matric year, as different bursaries close at different times. You might find that the bursary that was perfect for you has already passed and that you may have gotten into that one, but now you've lost your opportunity at funding. Then third, apply to as many bursaries as possible. Again, a lot of students are looking for bursaries. So to increase your chances of actually getting one, you need to cast your net as far as possible. So websites that you can find bursaries are zabursaries.co.za and Study Trust. Go on there and see what would apply to you. Now for the last section of my presentation, the final stretch, mastering your matric year. So this is what your 4 years of high school have accumulated into. It's time to give it your best shot. So this is a quote from me. Finals are a marathon, not a sprint. What I mean by that is you can't try to relax the entirety of your matric year and then finally give it your all when you actually hit finals. No, you need to be giving it your all throughout the year, from the very beginning to the very end. But like how you would run a marathon, it's important to pace yourself and give yourself breaks when necessary. That's how you get yourself through the year without suffering from burnout and losing the ability to actually put in effort. So here are the things that helped me succeed at the end. With regards to dealing with burnout, what helped me was remembering my end goal. Even when I felt like I did not want to study, I said, okay, would I regret studying more, or would I regret not achieving the bursary that I want in the future more? That's how I was able to get myself to carry on even when it was hard. Then secondly, it's important to schedule downtime. Again, you are human, you do need rest, you need sleep, otherwise you physically will not be able to go on. That's why it's important that you do give yourself rest time within your timetable. Then secondly, with regards to covering the syllabus, I consulted the subject assessment guideline document for every single test. Now, what the subject assessment guideline document is it's basically a master doc for every single subject that tells you exactly what you need to know for your matric exams. Now that's very helpful. So instead of studying absolutely everything and not knowing what to focus on, it helps you focus on specific details that you need to know so that you're able to perform as well as you can at the end of the year. Being used to using the SAGS document for every test means that you're more prepared for your final exam. Then third, learning from mistakes. So what I had done in my matric year was from the beginning, I kept every single assessment that I got back. I noted the misconceptions in my understanding with every mistake that I made in the test, and I worked on not repeating it. If you don't do that, if you're not actively trying to root out the underlying foundation behind why you made that mistake, you're likely to repeat it again. And that would harm your chances of improving throughout the year. Fourth, time management. It's important to create a timetable that prioritizes working on your weaknesses rather than letting your weaknesses slide and just hoping that it doesn't come up in the exam. Make sure that you're exposing yourself to the difficult work, to the work that you don't want to do, so that you become more familiar with it and that eventually it's not so difficult anymore. Fifth, continued revision. What my physics teacher had told me is that every Saturday, I should be doing at least one physics past paper so that I remember the content that I've learned throughout the year, because it's just so much to remember with physics. It's important to learn to remember long-term, not for immediate assessment. So I had June exams, prelims, and finals in my matric year. I studied for my June exams. I revised whatever else I had learned after my June exams for my prelims. And then when I got to finals, I already knew all the content because I learned to remember long-term. Then I could just do past papers and then just consult whatever I had forgotten in that time. Then sixth, it's important to learn from your peers. Make use of study groups to hold each other accountable and share your knowledge with each other. You might see that someone has a specific method that works a lot better than the one that you've been using, or they're able to explain a concept in a much easier way that you had not thought about. Lean on your friends. It will help you a lot in the long term. Finals is not a journey that you should be encountering on your own. So this is what my typical day looks like during exams. So on days I had no exams, from 9 to 12, I was writing a past paper because that was usually when I'd write a paper during my exam days. So I was used to being alert and writing during that time throughout my exam timetable. Then I had a break, and from 1 to 2:30, I'd study whatever I felt I needed to study. From 3 to 5, I would consult with the study group and then study all together so that it was less lonely and less daunting, essentially. From 6 to 9, I try another past paper. And then from 10 to 11, whatever mistakes I had made in the past papers I had done earlier that day, I would do corrections on them. And I specifically tried to learn from the mistakes I had made so that I would not repeat them in the next past paper that I did. On the days that I had exams, I'd revise from 5 to 7 in the morning because I find that my mind works best in the very early morning or the very late night, not in the middle of the day. So it's also important to find out what time of the day works best for you. From 8:30 to 12, I was busy writing the exam. From 3 to 5, I'd study again after giving myself a nice break so that I could rest and I wasn't feeling tired by the time I studied again. And then from 6 to 9, I was doing another past paper. On weekends, I allowed myself to be more flexible so that if I was really exhausted from the week, I could take the time to rest to avoid burnout. However, I ensured that I was still studying for at least 6 hours each day and doing at least one paper, but scheduled those hours according to how much I needed to rest. So maybe I'd start off later so that I could sleep in during the day. Then, with exams, I would have rituals before every exam to make myself relax. So for me, that would be going into the exam room and saying a really, really long prayer, because I'm very Christian, and that helps me calm my nerves and helps me feel better because I knew I wasn't doing it alone. So for some of my friends that was going on walks, for others that was going to, we had this quiet corner, so they would go there and scream. So it was little rituals like that to make yourself feel better before writing. I also made time for friends and going on walks and other stress relieving activities throughout my exam timetable to make sure that I was staying sane during the long 7 weeks. With the number of past papers that I had done per subject, I had done about 4. But with regards to mathematics and physical sciences, I did 12 for each subject, 6 per paper, because mathematics and physical sciences are subjects that you need a lot more practice with in comparison to my other subjects, as with those, theory is a lot more important with knowing. Then lastly, if I did not have enough time, I prioritized understanding concepts that I knew I struggled with. So I made sure that by the time I entered that exam venue at 8:30, there was nothing that I thought I did not know. I refused to enter this exam venue knowing that there was something that I would get wrong. So I made sure that at the very least, everything that I knew was a weakness, I was tackling that whenever I could. So then some useful resources. The Department of Basic Education Subjects Assessment Guidelines document can be found on the education.gov website, whereas the IEB one can be found on the IEB website. And then you can find National Senior Certificate past papers on the SA Papers website. So this is an archive of past exam papers for both the DBE and IEB exam. I recommend that you do past papers throughout the year, not just the exam season. You can also try different past papers from either examining board. However, avoid doing past papers that are older than 4 years because of changes in curriculum. Now, in matric, you're also writing your NBTs, right? So it's important to prepare for them. Remember, universities consider your NBT results as part of your education. As part of your application, especially universities like UCT. Therefore, it is important to try your best. The test has 2 parts, one part that's mathematics and then one part that's English, and is 6 hours long in total. You need to write that in one day, which can be very tiring. You can either write in person or online. I wrote online since that was best for me. And you need to visit the NBT website to see the NBT test dates. Now, it's best to write your NBTs between May and July. So from here, you should be planning to write your NBTs. At this stage, you would have covered the majority of the matric content. And you'd still be giving yourself enough time before prelims, if they haven't started yet, or after prelims, if you're already getting into that. And secondly, take note of each university's NBT deadline. For example, the NBT deadline for UCT is around the 31st of July. So if you're writing your NBTs after that, you won't be able to get into UCT. Whereas Wits allows you to write NBTs throughout the year and then just send that through after you've written them. Then lastly, make sure that you're using online resources to practice. So you can visit the NBT website where you can find online resources and past papers there that you can practice with. Or you can visit olicode.org, which also has NBT practice tests that you can use to prepare yourself. It's important to practice because what you'll see is that the NBT test structure is quite different from what you're used to in school. So you might find that you're not able to perform as well as you'd like to if you don't practice. Okay, so then now we've actually gotten to finals. How are you managing your stress during finals? Because again, for a lot of people, this is a make or break point. This is probably the most stress that you would have experienced in your life up to this point. And that can severely affect how you perform in your exams. So firstly, make sure to schedule downtime for yourself. Pushing yourself too hard can lead to burnout early on in the exam season. So with me, I'm someone who suffers from anemia, so it's very easy for me to feel very tired. That's why scheduling downtime was so important for me, so that I didn't end up burning out early on and I could still try my best throughout the exam season, especially since I was writing IT and physics close to the end of my exams. Also, with regards to that, if you are tired, try to avoid things like heavily caffeinated energy drinks, as that's quite bad for your health. What I had done was I had gotten myself some Slow Mag since I was a bit healthier and helped me with fatigue, but also helped me stay in a good physical condition, as that was also like a vitamin that I needed. Secondly, avoid writing exams when you're sleep deprived. Drink a lot of water and eat full meals. When you're sleep deprived, you're not in the space where you can think clearly about the answers that you're writing down. That's why it's important that you're still sleeping at least 7, preferably 8 hours every night, even though you're writing exams. Make sure that you're drinking a lot of water and eating full meals so that you stay healthy throughout the exams and that you have the energy to keep going. Thirdly, start exam preparation early to avoid cramming loads of content. Again, when you get to your matric final exams, Often, you're writing on 3 years worth of content. You cannot cover that in a single day. So make sure that you're starting exam preparation early to avoid having to do things last minute and then finding that you're unable to cover all of the work that you need to. Fourth, simulate exam conditions with past papers to overcome test anxiety and get used to time limits. What I would do when I was writing past papers, I would go to a quiet room, I would set a timer for 3 hours or however long the exam was, and I would write the exam without notes as if I was in the exam venue. That helped me see how much I still needed to study afterwards and how much I needed to prepare. And it made the actual experience of writing the exam on the day a lot less stressful because I was already used to it since I had done it so often. And then fifth, lean on your teachers for support. They want you to succeed. When I was in matric, our teachers were absolutely phenomenal. They were scheduling calls with us at literally 2 a.m. in the morning if some of us were stressed about an upcoming final because they wanted us to succeed. What I'm saying here is that if you feel like you're struggling or you need a concept re-explained to you, don't be afraid to go to your teacher for help. I'm sure that they would love to support you because they have that connection with you and they do want you to do well in the end. Now, to end off, here are subject-specific tips for the exams that I had written at the end of the year. Okay, so with English home language, for the poetry section, it's important that you're making detailed notes about the figures of speech, imagery, mood, tone, and intention. These are common questions that they ask you in your exams. Then secondly, in your answers, quote from the poems. Be very specific. That helps the examiner better understand what you're trying to say and what you're referring to, and you're more likely to get the mark. Also, they often do specifically give marks for quoting. With the literature section, it's important to learn significant quotes that you can use in your essays. That helps you to enhance your writing so that not only can the examiner see that you know exactly what you're talking about, it also means that in your essay, you're more likely aligning closely to the text and giving a very well-constructed response. Secondly, focus on character analysis and themes. Character analysis and themes are usually what the examiner centers the essay topics on. So it's important that you understand those sorts of things. Now, you can go to SparkNotes and LitCharts because those websites usually have very good notes on character analysis and themes. Then, with comprehension, it's important that during the exam, you're reading the text carefully at least once through before answering your questions. This helps you start thinking about the answers before you answer the questions. Secondly, know how to determine the tone and intention of the text. Those are also very common questions to ask, aside from questions about the text in general. And then thirdly, for comprehension practice, you can visit readtheory.org. It has a lot of reading texts that you can go through, and then it asks you questions, which helps you with the skills of comprehension and inference so that you can do even better in your English exam. Now, with language and grammar, because this section is specifically aimed at using common mistakes made in the English language in day-to-day speech, it's important that you're learning about those common errors, such as malapropisms, concord, verbosity, misuse of punctuation, mixed tenses, split infinitives, etc. So that when you get questions like that, you aren't fooled because it's referencing something that you probably say in your day-to-day life. Then, with regards to the section of visual literacy, it's important to learn propaganda and persuasive techniques. Visual literacy is usually based on cartoons that are trying to send out a specific message, or on advertisements that are trying to convince you to do something. Therefore, they'll be using these techniques, and you can enhance your answers by pointing that out. Secondly, Be very specific when referring to visual or textual details. You need to quote from the text or describe the visual that you're seeing, and then explain what effect it has on the viewer. With the section of creative writing, it's important that you're following the prompt carefully. It's also important that you learn all the transactional writing formats, or essays, or speeches, or open letters and such, so that you don't lose unnecessary marks there. And then lastly, make sure that you're using your own voice in your writing. The examiner wants to see your opinions, how you approach the prompt given. So if you're able to do that, instead of sounding like a parrot, you're more likely to be able to hit the 80s and 90s. Okay, so moving on to the subject of first additional languages, I had done Afrikaans. With the section of comprehension, it's very important that you're exposing yourself to the language and expanding your vocabulary. You can do this by, for example, listening to music in that language, or watching movies in that language, or reading books. That way, you're able to pick up more vocabulary that you can use in the exam. Secondly, the answers to the questions are usually in the text. That means that you need to be reading carefully and not just putting down the first answer that you see. Thirdly, you need to know how to describe body language and the names of household objects in that language. The reason for that is often when you get things like cartoons and advertisements, it's very important to know body language and household objects, because they'll directly ask you, okay, what is the person doing? Or what is the name of this? And if you're unable to answer that, you automatically lose the mark. Now, with the section of poetry, it's very important again that you're making detailed notes about the figures of speech, the poem structure, and the turning point of the poem, where there's a shift in tone. The reason for this is because it's another language. Chances are you don't have the ability to analyze such difficult poems during the exam. This is why whatever details you're given about the poem beforehand, you need to make sure that you know. Then, with regards to the section of creative writing, again, make sure that you're following the prompts carefully and learning all the transactional writing formats, as well as using your own voice. Additionally, keep your sentence structure basic to avoid making mistakes in your writing, because you get marks for language. Also, if you have the time, write a rough draft of your essay or whatever writing piece it is, fix your errors, and then write the final piece, so that you can minimize the number of errors that you have in the end and get the highest mark possible. And then lastly, the section of language. It's very important that you're learning the relevant rules for plurals, degree of comparisons, diminutives, adjectives, tenses, conjunctions, all the like. The reason for this is because these rules are not only very important in answering the language questions, but you should be using these rules in all the other sections of the test, in the creative writing sections and the comprehension sections, so that the answers that you're writing are grammatically correct. Then secondly, it's important to practice, practice, and practice some more. If you practice a lot, that means that you're able to get a sense of what is right with grammar. And that helps you more likely know the answer to a question, even if you've not necessarily seen it before. Then, with the subject of mathematics, not a favorite from what I've seen, it's important to consistently expose yourself to mathematics throughout the year. The reason for this is if you're constantly exercising it as if it's a muscle, by the time you get to the end of the year, you'll be able to know the concepts without having to learn them from scratch. And again, mathematics is something that comes very difficultly to some people. So it's important that you're not leaving concepts, forgetting about them, and then having to relearn them. Secondly, learn different ways to approach questions. The reason for this is, especially in your challenge questions, you'll have to think very creatively about a certain topic. So if you have different methods or different ways to solve something, you're more likely able to solve those challenge questions. Then, thirdly, rigorously check your answers if you have the time. Again, mathematics is a subject where it's very easy to make a little mistake. You write a 2, you see it as a 5, now your final answer is messed up. That's why, if you can, check the answer that you've written down to make sure that it aligns with the calculations so that you avoid losing unnecessary marks. Then fourth, use YouTube videos to re-explain content. YouTube channels that I personally find very helpful are Khan Academy and Kevin Math Science. Additionally, it's important that you're learning from your mistakes. Again, mathematics is a subject where a mistake that you make could easily be because of a misconception that you don't even know that you have. That's why it's important that you're actually analyzing your mistake instead of just saying that you did it wrong and then putting the correct answer next to it. Reattempt questions until you get them right. It's important that you're not just leaving questions that you get wrong and then hoping that you don't encounter them. If you get a question and you get it wrong, try to use different ways to get to the answer that it's supposed to be. Note what mistakes you tend to make in your calculations. That way, if you do that, you know what to look out for when you're writing the exam and you're checking your answers. Then lastly, online resources that I found very helpful for practice are again Khan Academy and siavilla.com. Now, with life orientation, it's very important that you're starting your projects very well in advance. LO is very time consuming, but it's a subject where it's very possible for everyone to get a distinction. You need to make sure that you're putting in the time to give yourself the best chance of getting that distinction. Secondly, formulate simple and concise answers in the exams. The reason for that is the examiner asks very direct, straightforward questions, and they expect direct, straightforward answers. They will not mark anything else aside from what's on the memo correct. Third, research the year's topic for examples to use in questions and essays. For example, my topic last year was about AI and the fourth industrial revolution. So what I did was I researched ethical dilemmas concerning that. For example, I searched the digital divide, the impact of AI on the environment. I researched whether we should be using AI as much as we're doing it, if it's going to leave people behind and get rid of jobs, that sort of thing. And I was able to use that to enhance my essay questions. Then lastly, participate in class discussions and listen to the viewpoints of your peers. Again, your peers could have very interesting viewpoints that you can use in an essay or in a question to get the mark that you want to get. Make sure that you're actively engaging so that they can enrich your own understanding of the topic. Now, for information technology. With regards to the practical, it's important that you're starting all of your practical assessment tasks very well in advance so that you can do your best in it. If you're hindered by time constraints, you could find yourself submitting projects that are filled with errors when you could have submitted a project that runs well and could get you the best mark possible. Secondly, consistently practice coding throughout the year on your own. It's important to do this so that by the time you get to a test or an exam, it's not so daunting when it tells you to try to execute a piece of code. Thirdly, it's important that you're understanding the purpose of specific code. You need to know what you're doing, not just parrot learning what to do. If you do that, it's a lot easier to know what type of code you need to use to be able to solve challenge questions that come at the end of the exam paper. Then lastly, find methods that suit you. With coding, there are many ways to get to a specific output. Make sure that you're using a method that not only you understand, but you will remember in the exam room. Now, with regards to theory, it's important to learn concepts in relation to real-life scenarios. They always ask questions in reference of a specific IT system or IT network. Then secondly, it's important that you're breaking content down into function, structure, example. For example, if we look at an operating system, you need to know what makes up an operating system, what is the function of an operating system, and then different examples of operating systems. Now, with the subject of life sciences, with paper 1, it's very important that you're used to the type of questioning used in exams. The way how you do this is by practicing a lot of past papers. The reason why you need to be used to the type of questioning is because life sciences requires very specific answers with specific terminology. If you master that, you'll be able to do well, even if you don't necessarily know what the answer should be. Secondly, break up the content into structure and function. So life sciences is about living organisms, right? You need to know the structure of a specific part of an organism, what makes the organism suited to the function because of that structure, and what the function of that thing is. For example, with regards to like muscles, you need to know what the structure of the muscle is, what the function of the muscle is, and how the structure of the muscle makes it suited to the function. Then also make sure that you're learning model answers for long explanation questions. Often with life sciences, they want you to mention specific facts in your long explanation questions. That's why it's important that when you're doing the past papers, you're looking at the memo and seeing what facts they want you to list. Also, very importantly, look at the mark allocation to make sure that you're mentioning everything. Paper 2, learn case studies and applications of the concepts in real life to easily answer case studies and form arguments in essays. So, if you learn the applications of concepts in real life, that helps you use your own knowledge in your essays to gain marks there, or to easily answer a case study question. For example, with regards to something like, let's say, population ecology, you might want to learn how certain ways of animal hierarchies help in the surviving of that animal group. Then third, practicals. It's very important that you're learning how to write out steps for scientific experiments. It's important that you learn how to handle apparatus, such as microscopes or how to read off of a measuring cup and things like that. And thirdly, it's important that you understand how to write out aims, hypotheses, conclusions, and variables, because it's basically a guarantee that they will ask you these questions in your practical exam. Now, with life sciences, YouTube channels that I have found very helpful were the Amiibo Sisters, Crash Course, and Osmond Science. I found these YouTube channels to explain concepts in a very easy to grasp manner. Then finally, the subject of physical sciences. For paper 1, physics, it's important that you're learning model answers for the explanation questions as well. The reason for this is because, again, they usually want you to mention a specific law or a specific rule in your explanation answers, and you will not get the mark if you leave that out. Secondly, it's important that you're learning your definitions and laws for physics for understanding, not just to regurgitate them. The reason for that is that the definitions and laws that they give you to memorize are specifically so that you get a better understanding of the content that you're learning. Thirdly, practice your calculation questions. With physics, what they often try to do is confuse you with wording in the question or by giving you a different situation that you may not have gotten in class. That's why exposing yourself to as many calculation questions as possible will increase your chances of doing well. Then lastly, relate your explanation answers to the equations. If you get a question asking you, okay, if you make this change to the circuit, what happens to the resistance of the circuit? You need to be referring to Ohm's law and using that to explain it. Otherwise, again, you will not get the full mark for that question. So sorry. Okay, then what I found very useful was using online simulations for visualizing concepts. What I saw was with certain physics concepts, for example, electricity, that can be harder to grasp if you don't have anything to visualize those laws to you. So things like FED Colorado, Physics Classroom, and Siovula have online simulations where you can build a circuit or build a certain force diagram and see what happens if you change certain quantities. And I found that super helpful. Like, it's basically being able to experiment from the comfort of your home. Now, with the chemistry paper, chemistry requires much more conceptual understanding than physics does, because you're thinking about things that you will never see, like in real life. Atoms and chemical equations, you'll never actually interact with that day to day. That's why it's very important that you're not thinking of all of these different topics in isolation. You'll find that bonding often relates to acids and bases. That relates to organic chemistry. That relates all the way through to electrochemistry. This is why what you need to do is draw on certain topics to aid in your understanding of others. Thirdly, learn definitions and laws for application, not just to regurgitate them. Again, for the same reason as physics, those definitions and laws are specifically there to enrich your understanding of the concept, not just to give you something to memorize. Then lastly, use the practicals in class to enrich your understanding. If you can, in a safe environment, try to conduct extra experiments in your practicals. So often what I had done was, if we had a practical, I would finish it and then I just add a little bit more water to my experiments and see what that would change, or a little bit more acid and see if that had any effect on the solution's ability to conduct electricity. This greatly helps my own understanding of how different quantities influence each other. Okay, so then that's it for physics. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening, and I really hope that it was a valuable experience for you guys.
Wow, no, thank you so much. You covered so much and covered it so clearly and beautifully. I do have some questions that have come through on the chat. We'll go through some of them. There's a common question that's coming up around family support. Kazimla's asking, was your family supportive? And also there's a question of if your family actually influenced or played a role in deciding which subjects you chose.
With my family, they were supportive, but they were quite far removed because I was in boarding school about 6 hours away from where I lived. So what I found was that I had to rely a lot more on my matrons in boarding and my friends in comparison to my family. But then again, it's very important that you're surrounded by people who do support you. So in boarding, they fostered an environment where us matrics could focus on just the exams. It should be the same with your families. So say you have a family where they're constantly demanding you to divert your attention elsewhere. It's going to be very difficult for you to complete the studying that you need to do well in your exams. So that sort of understanding is needed. And then with regards to my family influencing my subject choices, they actually gave me completely free rein because they knew that I wanted to pursue STEM. So whatever else I wanted to do, they let me do that. Whereas with my sister, she wasn't too sure what she wanted to do. So they told her, okay, since you're not 100% sure what subjects you want to take now, make sure that you're taking maths and physics so that you aren't hindered in whatever course you want to apply for in university later on. And then she ended up doing engineering. So I think it's important that your parents do guide you along, not dictate what subjects you do, but give you advice to make sure that you're not making the incorrect decision.
I love that. I love that. The importance of really being able to keep your options open by having the key subjects still there. Misa has a question about struggling with maths. It's not everyone's favorite subject, but it's a subject that's critical as a pathway to most careers. What advice can you give someone who's struggling with mathematics?
With me, I think the way how I view mathematics is very different from how other people view mathematics. I view mathematics as logic. So whenever I have a difficult question and I'm not really sure how to encounter it, I go back to knowledge and think, okay, if this is that number and it's changing in this way, then surely this has to happen. So that way, I was still able to complete difficult questions, even if I didn't know the correct method to solve them. But with mathematics, if you want to improve, your best bet is really practicing as much as you can. So, and specifically not giving up when you practice. So with that, what I mean is before tests, make sure that you're completing all of the questions in your workbook if you have the time, consulting past papers on the website if you have the time. Because what happens is then the more that you exercise that ability, the more that you're able to complete those questions in the exam. Because there's only so many questions that you can be asked. A lot of them are very similar to what you've already done before. That's why practicing is so important. Additionally, with that, if you find yourself making a lot of mistakes in past papers, make sure that you're going to a teacher and going through the past paper with them. After tests, see if you can take your test to the teacher and then have them explain where you went wrong in detail so that you can fix that later on. Make sure that you're relying on your teachers for help.
Thanks, Neo. Practice, 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 and using the resources you have available. There's a good question here from Ruda, just about staying motivated, even if you don't achieve what you expected to achieve. So the ability to bounce back and being able to improve on a marker. How did you handle disappointment and how did you stay motivated in spite of being disappointed?
I think the way I handled disappointment was from the genuine belief that I could do better. So even if a test had gone terribly wrong, then I would tell myself, okay, you know that you can do better than this. What do you need to do to avoid this happening in the future? So it's very important that you aren't telling yourself that just because you did badly in one assessment, you just aren't good at the subject. What you need to do is, again, go back, do your corrections. You need to make sure that you're practicing, and you need to tell yourself that it is possible for you to improve. Then again, if you're not meeting the mark requirements of like the 80s that you want, and you're somewhere at a 50, try to improve in manageable increments. So if you're at a 50 now, tell yourself, okay, let's see if I can get to a 60 in the next test, and then go that way. Then if you're setting manageable goals for yourself, then that will motivate you to try to go even further, and you're more likely to see success that way.
Love that, love that. I'm going to ask about a question from Aitumelo, who wants to know what the most important thing is to focus on just on the last few days before an exam. You've done all the work, you've done on all the prep. What does 72 hours look like before you sit down for your physics paper?
72 hours before, for me, that looks like trying to do past papers, going over like the very intricate details of things that I don't understand or things that I'm not confident with, making sure that I'm tackling all of that and making sure that I'm building my confidence in the subject. So if you're going to an exam and you're nervous and you're stressed, you're much more likely to not do well in the exam versus if you genuinely do have a belief in yourself that you will do well. So do everything that you can to build your confidence, see if you can meet up with your teachers, even if it's a concept that you think that you understand well enough, still go over it if you have the time, just to prepare yourself as much as possible.
Love that. And in closing, just in terms of like a quote that you anchored yourself in, a quote that kept you motivated throughout the year. It is, you said at the start, it's a marathon, not a sprint, as you do your matric year. What is it that kept you motivated and kept you going?
That I've had ever since, I think, grade 4 even, was reach for the moon. No, not reach for the moon, shoot for the moon. Even if
Yes,
you miss, land among the
on the
stars.
stars.
So that told me that, okay, let me try as hard as I can. Even if I don't reach the goal that I want to in the end, I will still achieve something to be proud of. And that helps me keep going.
Love that. Love that. Reach for the moon. Even if you fail, you fall. Even if you fall amongst the stars. A very interesting question that came just at the start of your presentation was you said you started life sciences in matric. How did you manage to get a distinction when you just started it at the end?
That one was an uphill battle for sure. I think it was definitely a mind game because I felt so behind my peers because all of my skills that I had in life sciences were from a grade 9 level, while everyone else was starting from a grade 11 level. So that made me feel very insecure. So what I did was I would go to my teachers if I was particularly struggling with something. So something that I was doing really bad in for a large part of the year until the exams were my life science argumentative essays. So after that, I would sit with one of the teachers and I'd say, okay, how can I specifically improve on this? And then every single assessment, I was trying to make sure that I was improving on that. Then with life sciences, I was also doing all of the practice that I could because there was really no other way. I had to make up for all of that lost practice somehow. So consistently during the year, I was doing past papers.
Nero, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. We're going to wish you all of the best as you continue with your first year in computational and applied mathematics. It's a tongue twister. Also looking forward to see what you'll do with this as a base, because you can go anywhere and do anything with this incredible qualification in STEM. So looking forward to it, and hopefully we'll find you again in the future and you'll have incredible stories to tell about how you're shaping the world with technology and mathematics.
Yes, thank you so, so much. And then thank you again for having me. And thank you again for all of the really great questions. I hope that all of you enjoy the rest of the year and that the tips that I have shared help you in some way to reach your goals.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That's Neo, a superstar FGL alumni, 7-star achiever from the very start, and didn't disappoint in her matric year and going to do great, great things. Vice Chancellor's bursary out at Wits University.